Hi, family, friends, neighbors, ideological opponents, and everyone else in between. My name is Josh Chilton, and today I'm going to present a pragmatic case for the radical push towards exclusively nonviolent protesting. Uh, and in light of political happenings and everything going on in our country right now, I feel like it's a good time to do so. But before doing so, I would like to acknowledge a few things. I come into this conversation from a place of extreme privilege. I hope that my little input into the conversation is accepted with the understanding that I, as an American citizen, have much less at stake in our current political climate than our undocumented or non permanent resident neighbors. I am fortunate, I'm in the position of coming from a colonial family who, on one side of my family, has been here since the 1600s, actually. And the other side of the family was an immigrant family who came here in the 1800s. So I've never had to worry about my status in the current society because the European colonizers and immigrants that led to me being here in this country and remaining the dominant subgroup in this country have made it so. I come from what is often referred to as WASPs, so white Anglo Saxon Protestants. And while I've dropped the Protestant designation of the WASP identity, I am still a white Anglo Saxon male. And I know that sounds like identity politics, but it is just the truth. And while I shudder to think about like some of the things that my ancestors may have did to like subjugate and mistreat indigenous populations and minorities throughout the centuries, like I cannot hold guilt for those actions. But what I can do is, do my part in pushing for more democratization, equality, civil rights, and general equity so that this nation that we live in continues to become a more perfect union where each person's unalienable rights to liberty, freedom, and the pursuit of happiness are respected and realized. In short, I am an egalitarian who believes that the purported principles of those founding documents they were expressed, and the subsequent evolution of jurisprudence within our legal structure as it interacts with culture and society should be extended to as many newcomers to this nation as possible. And I know there are barriers and legal ways that that should be happening, but we should all consider ourselves. If you live in America right now, we should all consider ourselves as having arrived here by one of four ways. You were either native to this land, meaning your ancestors were an indigenous population that was here before European colonizers arrived. You came here. The other category is you came here as a slave. Your ancestors came here against their will and were uh, violently, many times, taken from a land that they called home and brought to this nation. You came here as a refugee, who is seeking freedom from religious or political persecution, or you're an immigrant like me. And so, with that being said, I want to get into a slideshow that makes the pragmatic case against violent protest. And so, there's a famous uh, quote always attributed to Martin Luther King Jr., that the riot is the language of the unheard. And I must say, I do agree with that sentiment in general. I think there are always going to be outside agitators, but I think in many cases, when certain riots break out, it is kind of a collective voice of people who are saying enough is enough. We've had enough. The social contract has been broken and we don't care anymore. We don't give a fuck anymore, right? And so that's kind of where that quote comes from in my mind. But even with that being said, and how MLK's legacy is often whitewashed to kind of hide some of his more radical viewpoints, I want to make this case anyway as we go through. So, the number one reason that we should always advocate for nonviolent protest is because news and media coverage, the mainstream media, you always hear that term, the mainstream media, like their main job is to keep themselves financially viable. That means they will always gravitate towards the more sensationalized narratives because that attracts more viewers, which attracts more advertisers and creates more revenue. And so the media is always going to cover the most sensational looking things. And that's just a fact that we need to understand. So I want you to look at these two pictures that I'm showing here on this slide. So on the left is a picture from the Watts riots that broke out in, I believe it was 1965. And you see firemen and the smoke and the fires, and it might remind you of some of the pictures you've seen in recent days of Los Angeles, or pictures you've seen of the George Floyd protests. And so that is one way that protests can be, displayed by our media. But also look at the picture on the right. These are from the famous I believe it was 1960 Greensboro sit-ins, which ironically happened like 30 minutes from where I'm sitting right now as I'm recording. And what happened here was there were 4 students from North Carolina A&T University, which is a historically black college, who decided that as a means of peaceful protest, they were going to sit in an all-white diner and like be asked to be served. And basically, you see the image here. You see all these people behind them pouring drink on top of their heads, just generally laughing, making fun of them, mistreating them. And you can see, especially with the young lady in the middle at the counter, kind of the look of, resistance, but you feel empathy for her, right? So there's going to be one of two ways in our politics that the media is going to cover what is happening. And if it's a violent protest, they're going to focus on the violence, no matter how widespread that violence may be. That's what they're going to focus on. But if we're in the business of winning hearts and minds to a cause that we believe in, I think that image on the right does a much better service to us, where it shows people acting for a cause, passively letting others abuse them. And yes, that means putting usually black bodies in the way of harm. But that was a powerful tool in the fight for desegregation of schools, desegregation of public spaces, and the general civil rights movement of the 1960s. Um, so let's look at another picture. So this is a picture of in Minneapolis of part of the Black Lives Matter protests that took place after the death of George Floyd. A Time magazine report did a huge survey of all of the protests that took place nationwide during that era, which a lot of right wingers now like to call, in a mocking way, the summer of love. And you see that according to the data, 93% of BLM protests nationwide were entirely peaceful. But what do you think of when you think of the summer of 2020 and the Black Lives Matter protest? What do you think of? What is the first thing that comes to mind when you're thinking about that topic? It's this, right? It's this. We think of the damage, the anarchy that broke out, just the in a way that, at least in the modern era, we had never seen anything like that, where blocks of the city of Minneapolis were being destroyed. And so, this image is going to help our cause. Some people it will never win their heart or their mind over to. But this image right here is what every right wing media outlet, every right wing commentator or YouTuber will talk about entire cities being destroyed during the George Floyd protests. That's what they're going to talk about. And so just remember, as we're thinking and talking about protesting, how important it is for us to control the media narrative. And I'm going to get into the reality of how something like what happened in Minneapolis takes place. But just look at this imagery and just remember, like, even yourself, when you think back to those times, what comes to your mind first? Is it this or is it this? To me, even knowing what I know, this second image is what comes to my mind when I think of those protests. All right, here we're going to look quickly at a map of the city of Minneapolis. So this is only within the city limits of Minneapolis. The Minneapolis-St. Paul metro area is much, much larger than this. But this is the narrative that cities were burned down to the ground. How many times have you heard that in the media? These radical BLM people, they're burning cities to the ground. This map was put out by the city of Minneapolis in the aftermath of all the protests to show where the city had actually been burned down. And you can see, downtown is kind of, if you can see my mouse right here, it's kind of north of where you see all these red dots. All these red dots took place kind of in the area where George Floyd was killed. And these are areas where, yeah, more than 75% of the building that was ruined or burned down, like that's where 75% or more of the property was damaged. The yellow indicates, and the lighter the yellow is, the less damage that took place. So if you see these yellow dots, you're going to see that less than 25% of these buildings that are in the yellow were harmed. So I'm not saying that there wasn't billions of dollars worth of damage that took place in the city of Minneapolis during that time. But what I'm wanting us to understand is in context, a lot of times these are isolated areas where mass destruction begins to take place, and it can metastasize. You can see kind of in the top left corner of the city limits where there were some other areas where businesses were completely destroyed. But you see that in the main, the city of Minneapolis did not burn down to the ground. I lived in St. Paul during this time. I was there the day after the news stories hit about George Floyd. And I watched the video of George Floyd. And I challenge you to go back and watch those last 3 to 4 minutes when Floyd is unconscious and Chauvin remains on top of him while people are pleading for him to get off because the man had been unconscious for minutes and minutes at a time. Now, right wing news outlets are going to tell you, no, he overdosed on fentanyl, this and that. I'm a former opiate addict, and I will tell you firsthand experience. Um, the amount of opiates it would have taken to kill me in my prime would have killed about 30 people who had never tried opiates. Like, for a daily opiate user, it doesn't quite work the same. But that's not the point of this video. But I just want you to kind of see that the whole city was not burnt down. I'm going to skip this slide real quick because I put it in the wrong place. This is, don't worry about the IMPS. That's some organization who has a conference in Minneapolis each year. But they do have a 2025 picture of the city of Minneapolis as it stands today. And as you can see, the city of Minneapolis is standing strong. It has not burnt down. As a aficionado of city skylines, I can tell you that this building on the top right is a new skyscraper that was built. This other square looking building on the top right is also a new skyscraper that was built. No, Minneapolis is doing the opposite. It is thriving. It is a great place to live. I've lived there. So anyone trying to convince us that Minneapolis was burned to the ground, that's just a lie. That's just a lie. Yes, lots of damage was done, but it did not burn to the ground. But also, I want to get into this game of imagery that we play when it comes to political violence, protests, and violence. So the image that is, in the last 3 or 4 days, the image that just, blew up around the country was the image of this man on top of this burning car waving the flag of Mexico. And I can't count how many posts I've seen, how many tweets I've seen of people saying, well, if he doesn't like it here and he loves Mexico so much, he should go back to Mexico, And I'm not condoning that they burnt these cars and in this 10-block radius that there was a lot of violence. But again, we have to remember context. Los Angeles is the epitome of urban sprawl. It is a city that goes for 50, 60 miles in all directions. But the violence that took place as the result of illegal ICE raids was only happening in a 10-block radius. But what does everyone see? Everyone sees this man waving another country's flag, and they decide, yeah, these people, they're just, anarchists. They don't care about America. They don't love America. And but so I wanted to show some other pictures of Americans touting flags from other nations. So on the top left here, we'll see in Boston on St. Patrick's Day. What flag is that? That doesn't seem to be a flag of America. Are these American hating Irish immigrants who need to be kicked out? No, it's St. Patrick's Day. I passed by a house in within a few neighborhoods of mine a couple days ago, and they were waving a British flag on their porch. Are they American hating? Do they deserve to be, kicked back to Britain because they have a British flag? The picture in the middle, a man who has an American flag with the Jamaican flag kind of bursting through the middle of it. So he's acknowledging, as all of us should, if we can trace our ancestry back to a certain place, we're all coming from different places to America. And he's just making a simple acknowledgement that this is where my ancestors are from, and now I'm American. Again, Italian restaurants. Have you ever been to an Italian restaurant? They got Italy flags all over the place. This bottom right picture is from a march for Cuban pride in America. There's lots of Cuban Americans, like especially like in Miami. Cuban pride in America has always been a thing as Cuban immigrants came into this country. So let's not let the imagery of a moment capture us because it makes us angry that we see smoke and we see this guy who looks kind of, like a nefarious character waving this flag. Now, I say this also to say violent protests are not the way to go because that image right there in the middle is everything most people are going to remember about this incident. And so, like, that's just what it's going to be. And that's why nonviolent protest is the way to go. Another reason that we should always advocate for nonviolent protest is because political riots are huge opportunities for bad actors to come into play. By the second to third day of the George Floyd protests, people had descended upon our city of St. Paul, Minneapolis, from all over the country. They saw an opportunity. And this picture on the right here was the man who became famous as the Umbrella Man. That's what everyone calls him because he was holding the umbrella. Now, the Umbrella Man was caught on tape. He's trying to cover up, his identity as much as possible, but there was enough evidence where, as people looked through it, to see that this was not likely not an activist. This was a man who broke the first window. He started the first property damage that took place before the riots really started to destroy that first block of, where things started to get destroyed during the Black Lives Matter protests. So because there was political violence already getting stirred up, it created an opportunity for an agent provocateur to jump in and make things worse. Because, for these far right extremist groups like Ivan Harrison, a man who drove all the way from Texas to Minneapolis with an AK-47, what they see this as is an opportunity. They see this as an opportunity to take advantage of the chaos and to stir up even more civil unrest because they know that the more violence that takes place, the more opportunity there is for their political goals to be obtained, because they know that the majority of white conservative Americans are going to look at just the imagery of what is happening, and they are going to blame poor black people for quote unquote destroying their own neighborhoods. And that's not to excuse certain activists who may have destroyed businesses in their own neighborhoods. Like, I'm not saying that didn't happen. I'm just saying when political violence takes place, it creates an opportunity for bad actors to come in. Those bad actors include looters. Sometimes there's a lot of political activity going on. There's activists out there, there's protesters out there, and poor people, or sometimes people who might not be poor, but just don't have the best moral compass in the world, see an opportunity, right? Chaos creates opportunity for looters to come in. General outsiders, I already kind of spoke on this, but on the third day of the riots, they had data showing that 80% of the people arrested on one of the biggest days of rioting in the George Floyd protests were from outside of Minneapolis, St. Paul area. These people were descending on the city to take over and to create opportunities for them to push their political narratives by stirring up chaos. Gangs, just from a pragmatic standpoint, like if you're an activist and you're participating in violence and it gets crazy, that opens the opportunity for actual gangs within urban areas, because they do exist, to take advantage and do things that they might not normally do when police attention is not diverted elsewhere. And so it's just the political riot, the protest turned riot is just an opportunity for anyone to come in and take advantage. And the next reason I think that we should radically advocate for nonviolent protest is because politics isn't always about right or wrong. There are things that are morally right, ethically wrong, morally wrong. There may be cases where violence is justified. Violence is justified in some cases. But that's not our goal here. We got to think about the big picture. Politics is about winning. Politics is about who gets to have power, who has the willingness to go the extra mile, to do what is necessary to obtain power. Like, that may be a Machiavellian, maybe stance that some people might see as cynical, but it's, to me, it rings true. Politics is about winning. Research shows that nonviolent protests are more likely to achieve political goals. And why is that? Because nonviolent protests attract broader participation. Like, you're not going to see as many moms and grandmas and kids going out to protest a cause that they truly care about and believe in if they think violence is on the table, right? Nonviolent protests help delegitimize the political opponent's narratives. So there's been massive reports out recently that Trump is loving what is happening in LA right now. Like, he doesn't care if people get hurt. He just loves that this is an opportunity for him to flex his muscles a little bit and see how far he can push our legal system to allow him to basically put American military against its own citizenry, which in the history of America we have been very hesitant to do so. Nonviolent protests make it harder for the, and this is kind of what I'm getting at. It makes it harder for your political opponents to crack down, or make laws that threaten civil liberties. If the media is showing a city burnt, quote unquote, burning down, it makes it much more easier for the politician to justify sending in, stronger and stronger, bigger and bigger authorities in terms of National Guard. God forbid our own U.S. military that was called in, militarized police units, and it can even erode the right to participate in protest because people can see that their civil liberties like are under attack because they're cracking down to make sure violence doesn't happen again. It gives us the moral high ground in media coverage. When we are nonviolent, that was MLK's whole thing. Like I mean, I don't know if I would have had the stones to do what he did and the people who were with him did. They put their bodies on the line and let themselves get hosed by fire hoses, beaten by cops, and they put themselves on the line just to allow everyone to see, what was happening, what was really going on out there. And so it's going to give us the high ground, the moral high ground in terms of media coverage when we're nonviolent. And the last reason, that this is about politics is that you can still disrupt the status quo without going to violence. Like, just like the Greensboro sit in, just like all the long history of nonviolent protests we have seen in America, there are ways to get people's attention, to disrupt the status quo without turning to violence. Yeah, this is just a little bit about how much Trump loves what is happening right now. Trump clearly wants violence in LA. After promising to target criminals for deportation, and to make up for the fact that they were having some trouble actually finding enough immigrant criminals to deport, like, they resorted to what started this recent Los Angeles protest was the fact that ICE was waiting for people to get out of work at Home Depot and just like waiting in parking lots to arrest them. That's ridiculous. Like, that's what he had to resort to because his normal tactics weren't working. This other quote: for the White House, this scene, Trump battling a blue state over his signature issue, which is immigration, is a political win. This is a political win. Even Trump's administration is acknowledging that. It's a nationally watched reality TV show, which is Trump's favorite thing, right? We're happy to have this fight, one White House official said. And then this quote that I found on Fox News, like, Trump said when asked if he wanted border czar Holman to arrest Gavin Newsom, the governor of the state of California, he said, I would if I were him. Like, we're getting to the point where Trump's getting so much momentum from what this little 10-block riot in Los Angeles that it's given him the big enough political win to say, oh, we might arrest the governor of the whole state when the governor has not broken any laws. Is there ever a time for political violence? Yes, there is. Sadly, there are times when I would submit that it's time to take violent action against the state. And I hope whoever's watching these isn't reporting me. I'm not saying I'm doing that. I'm saying if there is a theoretical time when that is appropriate. But we ain't there yet. We are not there yet, folks. I know we're angry, and I would even say we're not angry enough about what is happening right now. But we ain't there yet. And God knows we're not ready to sacrifice what would be needed to go into a fight like that against our own government. This ain't 1776, folks. This ain't 1860. This is 2025. And Trump right now is the man in the Oval Office, the commander in chief of a U.S. military industrial complex that just reached a $1 trillion a year budget. Like, we ain't got the tools for real political violence to quote unquote overthrow whatever we don't like about what's happening right now. The only thing that would happen if we took up arms right now and tried to take on our government is we're getting all killed by drone strikes in like 2 minutes and it's over. Political revolution over 2 minutes. Like, Trump has fascist ambitions and tendencies, but we still have federalism. That's still holding up despite the erosion and the boundaries of the structure of our constitutional order. Trump is an old man. He's not going to be around forever. But if there was a time for political violence, now is not the time, because A, we're not prepared, and B, we would never win a fight like that. We would all just get killed immediately. The technology of our government and the military, we don't even understand the things they could do to this. And so I want to leave us with this quote. If you've ever seen Breaking Bad, I want to leave us with this quote that Walter White said to Hank Schrader when Hank finally realized that Walter White was Heisenberg. And Hank was looking at Walt, and he was like, "I don't know you. I don't even know who I'm talking to." And Walter looks him dead in the eye and said, "If that's true, if you don't know who I am, then maybe your best course of action would be to tread lightly." And I hate to say that. I hate to say that's the message I got to send out to people right now, but we got families to think about. We got loved ones that we have to take care of. And so right now is not the time for political violence. All it will do is get us and perhaps our loved ones killed. And so, in summation, I'm all for protesting. This isn't a moral thing that I'm trying to explain to everyone today. This is a strategical argument that I'm trying to make. If we want to win, we have to win enough hearts and minds over to the Democratic poll places and voting booths in the next midterms. That's our only job. That's all we can do at this point. And anytime any protest breaks out into violence, all it does is help the right-wing machine spin a media narrative that is going to be to our detriment. It's not going to help us. So let's save that rage. Let's organize. Let's get strategic, and let us define a point at which in the future we might have to, think about some other tactics. But for now, as a pragmatic matter, It's not time. It's not time yet. We need to all make it as safe as possible to protest. We need to make those environments family friendly. We need to make it so that as many people as possible can get out there. And when we get agitated against by the police, by the National Guard, by whoever these government Gestapo ICE people are, we need to put our bodies on the line, meaning we're not going to be violent. And the media is going to have to capture that. It's going to have to capture the state committing violence against us while we remain peaceful in order to change enough hearts and minds to make this thing work. But I appreciate everyone who's watched this. Whether you agree with me or not, please like this video. It helps my channel grow. Please subscribe. Please do all the things, because like I want to start doing this more regularly. And in order for it to be like worth it, I need to get some more subscribers. I got like 47. So even if you don't like me, just click subscribe for me. Like, do it as a gesture. You don't have to watch. But I appreciate you watching if you did. And we'll see you next time. Peace.